Hello there, AP Environmental Science class. Welcome to my lecture on Chapter 10, Sustaining Terrestrial Biodiversity, Forests, Public Lands, Grasslands, Wetlands, and Cities. Now, I do want to make a point about this lecture. Unfortunately, or fortunately, if you like listening to these, this lecture has 90 slides to it, this chapter. As a result, I'm going to break this lecture down into 3 parts, all right, each about 30 slides each. Again, just easier for me to deal with on my end, and then I'm sure easier for you guys to kind of watch on your end as well if I break them up. So again, Chapter 10 will be broken up into 3 lectures, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and again, that's because there are about 90 slides, so again, it'll be about 30 slides per lecture. All right, so let's get to it. Here is Part 1. We start off with a core case study talking about Costa Rica, a global conservation leader. So again, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Costa Rica. I've never been there. My parents have been there twice. They love it so much, and they're actually a leader around the world in conservation. So Costa Rica was once covered in tropical forest. They suffered widespread deforestation between 1963 and 1983. However, they still harbor great biodiversity. They have a lot of microclimates which provide them with a variety of habitats. If you know Costa Rica, there's a mountain range pretty much that runs right through the country. And on the east side, you have the Gulf of Mexico. On the west side, you have the Pacific Ocean. And so those actually lead to different microclimates. And so they provide a variety of habitats for a lot of different species. More than 25% of Costa Rican's land is natural reserves and national parks. And the government actually pays landowners to restore forests. Again, this is a way to help because of that deforestation that happened back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. Now they're getting a lot of those forests back, and one of the ways is that government actually pays landowners to restore forests. So here's a beautiful shot. This is La Fortuna Falls. This is in the Costa Rica's Arenal Volcano National Park, and again, this is what a tropical rainforest looks like, guys. If you have never been to one, I've never been to one. I hope to do it one day. All right, so how should we manage and sustain forest and public lands? Well, forest ecosystems provide ecosystem services far greater in value than the value of the wood and other raw materials that we may be getting out of our forest and our public lands. Forests can be preserved by halting government subsidies that hasten their destruction, by protecting old-growth forests, and by sustainably harvesting trees. And we're going to talk all about that over the next couple of slides. So let's put a price on nature's ecosystem services. Again, ecological economists estimate the value of Earth's ecosystem services, and here are some of the numbers or the values that kind of go with that. So waste treatment, again, we're not talking about the waste treatment plant down the street where your raw sewage goes. We're talking about ecosystem services that the Earth naturally provides us. So naturally, the Earth provides us with waste treatment that if we put a monetary value on it would be over $22 trillion per year. Recreation, right? Over $20 trillion. Erosion control. Very important, especially with forests. Costs, put a value on that, about $16 trillion per year. Food production, almost $15 trillion per year. Nutrient cycling, over $11 trillion per year. Again, if you estimate the value of those services. So again, while you do make some money by cutting down a forest and selling wood, you're not making as much money as these estimated values of the ecosystem services that you're destroying by cutting down that forest. So since 1997, the world has been losing ecosystem services valued at about $20 trillion per year. Ongoing source of ecological income, though, if used sustainably, because forests can regrow themselves, right? So if used sustainably, it could be a source of ecological income, but unfortunately, it's not being used sustainably in many parts of the world. So what do we need to do? We need to use that full cost pricing that I've spoken about multiple times already in this course to include the values of the ecosystem services in the prices of forest goods and services. So again, you take that piece of wood and you increase its price 10% to maybe, I'm just using values here, but let's say you increase it 10% to subsidize the ecosystem services that you're losing. Maybe less people will buy the wood. Maybe us in our brains and with our technology can come up with resources that are like wood, but not wood really, something we can make up, some kind of synthetic wood that again would help decrease the amount of deforestation going on around the world. In addition, and we've spoken about this a little bit, we will talk about it more in some upcoming chapters, but taking a tropical rainforest and making it into monoculture, or basically one type of tree or plant. So what this is an oil palm tree plantation, okay? So what has happened is they have basically clear cut the forest or the tropical rainforest, and they plant all these palm trees. Now, on one hand, you say, hey, that's not too bad, right? Because at least they're planting trees. We're not dealing with a totally exposed land. However, when you just have one type of tree, that destroys your biodiversity, because certain organisms may not be able to live within oil palm trees, and therefore they will not be able to live here. Certain creatures can, they'll live here, but again, you're decreasing the biodiversity by creating these monocultures, and we see that a lot here in the U.S. I've never actually taken Interstate 80 all the way out to California, but from what what I've been told is that when you get to Illinois, Indiana, those kind of states out there in the Midwest, Iowa, all you see for hours and hours and hours are cornfields on either side of the road. Again, monoculture, not good for biodiversity. Actually, it's a biodiversity killer. So forests provide important economic and ecosystem services like we talked about, and these are some more of them that, again, we'll get into in a bit more detail. So forests help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that helps stabilize atmospheric temperatures, all right? That's one of the ecosystem services. I would honestly know at least a few of these, all right? Definitely put them to memory. Forests store water and release water slowly. That's very important. Forests provide habitats for 2/3 of the world's terrestrial species. Forests provide biofuel, industrial wood, and traditional medicines that we also use. So again, these are the important economic and ecosystem services that forests provide. And once again, our favorite chart here have ecosystem services on the left, economic services on the right. Again, this is your natural capital from forest. And once again, I would definitely have an idea of at least a few on either side here so that you can use them to potentially answer an FRQ. So ecosystem services support energy flow and chemical cycling, reduce soil erosion, absorb and release water, purify the water and air, influence local and regional climate, store atmospheric carbon, right? We did that lab at the beginning of the year, and provide numerous wildlife habitats. Economic services that forests provide: fuel wood, lumber, pulp to make paper, mining, livestock grazing, recreation, and jobs. All right. So again, definitely understand and have a few of these in mind if you need to pull them out for an FRQ. All right, so we have a lot of different types of forests out there. In fact, forests are going to vary in their age and structure. So we have what are known as old growth or primary forests. These are forests that have been uncut or undisturbed for over 200 years, and they are reservoirs of biodiversity. We don't have a lot of these old growth forests left, but there definitely are some around. I'm going to show you a picture of one in Poland. There are some out in California as well. Again, they haven't been disturbed for over 200 years. Second growth forests are trees that have formed via secondary ecological succession. So again, they haven't been undisturbed for 200 years, but maybe they've been undisturbed for 100 or so. We call that a second growth forest. And again, we have those tree plantations. We talked about tree farm commercial forests, basically the same age trees. They're clear cut and replanted to supply industrial wood, all right? Or in the oil palm tree case, palm oil, okay? But again, those would be your tree plantations, second growth forest, and your old growth or primary forest. So just understand the difference between the three. And again, this is an old growth forest in Poland. Again, this forest has been undisturbed for over 200 years, and once again, a reservoir for biodiversity. All right, so how can we harvest trees? Because look, we are going to need lumber, we do need wood, we do need some of the economic services that the forest provides. So how can we harvest trees to maybe harvest them more sustainably? So first, let's talk about some terms here. First step, you have to build logging roads, which is bad in its own right, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. You have something known as selective cutting, intermediate age or mature trees cut singly or in small groups. That would be selective cutting. You have clear cutting, which is removing all the trees in an area. And then you have strip cutting, which clear cuts in strips. All right, and I'll show you some pictures of these in just a second. But again, selective cutting, we only selectively choose trees to cut or in small groups. Clear cutting, we take rid of everything. Strip cutting, we'll cut in strips. So there'll be, strip will be clear of trees, then you'll have some trees, then a strip clear of trees, etc., etc. So what we're looking at here is basically ways to do this. But unfortunately, what happens is the first step is building those logging roads, and those logging roads, unfortunately, lead to not only getting technology into the forest to cut the trees down, but what these roads now begin to do is they lead to fragmentation, destruction, and degradation of the forest ecosystem. So you'll notice here on the left we have an old growth forest, right? And they cut a highway in there to get the equipment in, or the technology in, that they need to cut down the trees. But what happens is once you do that, now you're fragmenting this forest, right? We spoke about that in a previous chapter, how now you have a forest on one side of the road, a forest on the other. Animals that live over here, creatures, may not be able to get to the other side. So now we're messing up their migration habits, their where they're living. And then again, eventually you clear plots for agriculture, you clear plots for grazing, and now this old growth forest, as you can see here, has become fragmented and destroyed, and that basically degrades the forest ecosystem of the natural capital that the forest provides us. So again, this is how we harvest trees right now, and again, we maybe need to kind of change this. So again, here is your selective cutting, where you just selectively cut trees down. Here's clear cutting, all right, where you take everything, and then here is your strip cutting, all right? You see this is cut about a year ago. These trees are starting to grow in, etc., etc. So when it comes to sustaining forest, you definitely would prefer A, right? Selective cutting is going to be more sustainable because you're not taking the entire forest down. You're leaving trees up that can allow organisms to stay there, so you can still provide the ecosystem services that you need. Obviously here, not only can you have no creatures living with the clear cutting, but now the erosion is going to be a big issue. And then strip cutting is kind of in between. It may not be as good as selective cutting, but definitely a little bit better than clear cutting when it comes to sustaining biodiversity in our forests. Okay, we then have to talk a little bit about fires, because fires do affect forest ecosystems. We have forest fires every year throughout the world, and they're actually, many of them are natural, and many of them are actually positive for ecosystems. We have surface fires, which usually burn leaf litter and undergrowth. They actually provide several ecological benefits that we'll talk about. Then we have what's known as crown fires. They are extremely hot. They burn the whole trees. They kill wildlife, and they increase topsoil erosion. And we talk about how climate change has been lengthening the fire seasons in many parts of the world. So just taking a look at a picture of this stuff, you'll notice on the left we have basically what we're going to call the ground fire or the surface fire. And why this could help for a couple of reasons. Number one, you clear out all the brush, the undergrowth, and all the leaves on a forest floor without destroying all the trees. That actually reduces the chance of getting one of these massive crown fires on the right. So it's actually a preventative measure, because usually these crown fires on the right here, these big ones, are started in the underbrush, right? Dry leaves, dry grasses, things like that. So if you can slowly burn, right, in a surface fire, that undergrowth, that lessens your chance of getting one of these huge crown fires. In addition, what you're doing is when you burn the undergrowth here in a surface fire, is that you allow, not only do you make the soil a little more fertile, but you allow other trees and other things that may have been kind of kept under wraps because of all the leaves and all the undergrowth. Now that undergrowth is gone, so the trees drop their seeds, and now you can actually get new trees to form and actually grow a little bit faster. So again, surface fires are not all negative, and in fact they have a lot of positives to it. It's those crown fires on the right that destroy everything, and that's what we want to not have happen. And again, sometimes surface fires can actually act as a preventative measure against those ground fires. All right, now we're going to talk about almost half of the world's forests have been cut down. Again, we talk about that term deforestation a bunch. What is it? The temporary or permanent removal of large expanses of forest for agricultural, settlement, or other uses. Tropical forests, especially in Latin America, Indonesia, and Africa, are being cut down. And the boreal forests in Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia are also being cut down. The latter for your lumber, and the former not only for lumber but for to do agricultural, to have areas for farming and for grazing and things like that. So these are the reasons why we're seeing these forests being cut down. And what happens with deforestation, the natural capital degradation that occurs? Well, water pollution and soil degradation from erosion. Again, trees, those roots hold soil in place. You take rid of those trees and now there's nothing to hold the soil in place. So when it rains, all that soil gets washed away. That is what we call erosion. And that it leads to flooding, right? So without forests, you accelerate the flooding chance in an area. Local extinction of specialist species, habitat loss for native and migrating species, and we have a release of carbon dioxide and a loss of carbon dioxide absorption, right? When you burn wood, you release carbon dioxide into the air. Well, now you're not replacing that wood, so you lose the amount of carbon dioxide that can be absorbed or sequestered. And obviously now we're throwing that carbon cycle out of whack. And again, here's a picture. This is a severe soil erosion. You can see what has happened here. This forest was cut down. There was some grazing that was done on it by livestock animals. Now, though, the livestock has moved on, and what you're left with is this. And you could see here all the erosion that has occurred, all the soil being taken away. What do we talk about? We haven't gotten into soil as much, but usually the top bit of the soil is your fertile soil, right? Think back to earth science, right? That O horizon, right, where you have all your humus and that real fertile soil. Well, none of that exists here anymore in this picture because it's all been eroded away. So now you have land that is pretty much useless. You can't even grow crops on it for either eating or for grazing animals. It's pretty much useless land now. And obviously that's not what we want. So that moves us into a core case study, managing public lands in the United States. Forests in the eastern U.S. were decimated between 1620 and 1920, so for about 300 years. Many, though, have now grown back naturally through secondary ecological succession in the past 100 years or so. We spoke about that a little bit earlier. Large areas of old growth and second growth forests are cut down and replaced with biologically simplified tree plantations. Growing threat, hardwood forests cleared to produce wood pellets for export, just an example. So again, we're seeing these old growth and second growth forests cut down and replaced with just one type of tree, one type of plant, okay? And again, when you have those monocultures, one type of culture growing, that again is a biodiversity killer. So here's a picture that pretty much tells a stark story. You'll notice 1620, areas in green are your forests, right? Most of the eastern U.S., east of the Mississippi, was just covered in forest, right? Look at 1920, most of them are gone. Now 2000, many of them are coming back through secondary succession. So again, a little bit of some good news here, but obviously still much more in the way of work to be done. In addition, tropical forests are disappearing rather rapidly as well. Majority of their loss has happened since 1950, mostly in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America. Again, this is due to agriculture, clearing for agriculture, clearing for grazing livestock as well, and clearing trees accelerates climate change. Indonesia leads the world in tropical deforestation because they're destroying rainforests to produce that palm oil, right? Those palm trees, big business, okay? But basically you're taking this biodiverse tropical rainforest with all these different types of plants and trees and organisms living in it, and you're cutting it down and planting one type of tree. Again, going to kill and destroy that biodiversity. So various causes for these tropical forests disappearing. Again, we talked about it. Population growth. We need places for people to live. Poverty of subsistence farmers. Okay, they don't have a lot of money, so they need to get as much land as they can garner to plant crops. Ranching. Again, that's livestock. Lumber. Okay, money there. Plantation farms like the palm oil. Again, money, and obviously global trade as well. are reasons that you're seeing these tropical rainforests disappear as rapidly as they are. So, how can we manage and sustain our forests? Well, methods to sustain forests include emphasize the value of their ecosystem services, all right, that would be with that full cost pricing, halt government subsidies that hasten their destruction. So in many cases, companies get tax breaks if they cut down a lot of trees or pull a lot of coal out of the ground or things like that. We want to halt those subsidies. We want to protect our old growth forests, the ones that have been undisturbed for over 200 years, as they are really our reservoirs of biodiversity. We want to harvest trees no faster than they are replenished. That's why that selective tree cutting makes more sense than just clear cutting, right? Because you're harvesting a tree or two here, but you're letting others replenish rather than just cutting the entire forest down in what's known as clear cutting. And we need to plant trees to reestablish the forest that we have cut down. So, some widely used approaches, all right, maximum sustainable yield, harvest the maximum amount of trees that will not reduce future yield, all right? So these are ways that we can manage our forests more sustainably, all right? Do that maximum sustainable yield. It's just what it sounds like. Harvest the maximum amount that you can get without reducing future yield. And to me, that's a win-win for everyone because you still make money, but you're not destroying or clear-cutting the forest and reducing the biodiversity. Ecosystem-based management, again, minimize harmful harvesting impacts on the ecosystem. And again, the selective cutting does that. And adaptive management, harvest forest, evaluate results, and then modify the approach. Look at what's going on when you do harvest the forest, evaluate the results of it, and then modify your approach to better deal with the potential forest that you are going to be potentially cutting. Here are some more solutions for more sustainable forestry. All right, include those ecosystem services of forests and estimates of their economic value. Again, full cost pricing. Identify and protect highly diverse forest areas. Stop logging in the old growth forests. We need to leave the old growth forests alone because even if you just do selective cutting, you have to build a road, right, to get the logging equipment into the old growth forest, and that begins the process of fragmentation and degradation of that forest ecosystem. Stop clear cutting on steep slopes. You're killing it with erosion, right? You clear cut on steep slopes, all that erosion, all that topsoil is being washed away, making the slope useless. Reduce road building in forests and rely more on the selective and strip cutting. Again, more selective. Best to be selective. Strip would be the second. We want to get away from that clear cutting. Leave most standing dead trees and larger fallen trees for wildlife habitat and nutrient cycling, right? You need those trees to rot away, basically, right? To cycle those nutrients. So when you take all the trees out, now you're messing with that nutrient cycling. So let the trees fall. Let them slowly rot away, right? We need that for not only their wildlife habitat, but for that nutrient cycling. Put tree plantations only on deforested and degraded land. So let's not waste any more. Don't create any more deforested and degraded land to make tree plantations. Find land that has already been deforested and degraded, and that's where you put your tree plantations. And certify timber grown by sustainable methods so that when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can look and you can say, all right, this timber not grown by sustainable methods. I'm not buying that piece of lumber. This piece of lumber, though, is grown by sustainable methods because it's certified. That's the one I'm going to buy. And then hopefully by doing that, we can manage our forests more sustainably. We also need to improve the management of forest fires because, again, while forest fires can be helpful in some ways, they can be very harmful in others. So the U.S. Smokey Bear educational campaign, I don't know if you guys do that much nowadays, but when I was growing up, when I was your age, this was a huge thing. In fact, there was actually a road called Skyline Drive out of my hometown of Ringwood, New Jersey, which is just about 20 minutes from here across the bridge. And on the top of it, it's still there. There's a sign with Smokey Bear, and it says is the fire threat low, medium, or high. And I would always remember driving over that, going to my grandparents' house, and always checking, oh, low fire danger today, oh, high fire danger today. And again, it's just an educational campaign, right? If you know there's going to be high fire danger and you're going out maybe camping, maybe you got to, maybe you shouldn't be cooking, or make sure if you are going to be cooking on a fire, open fire, make sure it's out. Just again, understand the forest. Prescribed burns, again, remove flammable material and underbrush. Those are those surface fires. Actually create them so that you can better alleviate the issue of maybe having one of those big crown fires. Allow fires on public land to burn as long as structures are not threatened. Again, if you're not destroying the whole forest, some of these fires can actually be helpful to the ecosystem. Protect structures in fire-prone areas. Thin nearby trees and vegetation. Eliminate use of highly flammable construction material. This is done out in California, believe it or not. In some places, they actually do. Folks go out and make sure when the fire season begins that all the nearby thin trees and vegetation and underbrush near their homes are all gone, so that if a fire does come, it has less of a chance of turning into that crown fire. And now we can use drones with infrared sensors to detect fires and monitor the progress in fighting them. In addition, we can reduce the demand for harvested trees, and just another way, that we can help preserve our old growth and secondary growth forests. Improve the efficiency of wood use. Right now, 60% of the U.S. wood use is actually wasted. Think about that. That's a sad number. So if we can improve the efficiency of that, well, then we will obviously need less trees. Make tree-free paper. All right, Kenaf, rice straw, hemp. These are all other types of plants that we can make paper from, and we don't have to kill or cut down old growth or secondary growth forests, and reduce the use of throwaway paper products. It's funny, I used to use paper plates, and then a friend of mine, his wife, who's very into ecology, was like, Bryson, that's my first name, why are you continuing using those plates? You're killing the environment. And she was right. And so now I have a washing machine. We wash our plates. I really don't use paper plates anymore. Yes, it's easier with kids to have paper plates, but I've stopped using them because I hear Andrea's voice in my head telling me to stop using those paper plates. So we use regular plates, and then we just wash them, And so we reduce the use of those throwaway paper products. Kenaf, what is it? It looks like this. It's a fast-growing plant that actually could be used to make paper. All right, so that concludes part 1 of my lecture on Chapter 10, Sustaining Terrestrial Biodiversity, Forests, Public Lands, Grasslands, Wetlands, and Cities. Remember, there are going to be 3 parts. This is part 1, so please check back for part 2 and part 3. And as always, thanks for listening.